My girlfriend kissed another man in front of me, locked eyes with me, then ordered me to compete for her. She smeared me as cold after I walked out. But the $180 dinner receipt proved she'd planned him weeks earlier. She kept calling it nothing, until her 4-minute voicemail confessed the entire game. I'm 27. I work in project management for a mid-sized logistics company. Nothing dramatic about my life before this. I don't usually write things like this. Qley and I met 14 months before that party. A mutual friend's birthday, the kind of apartment gathering where you only know 4 people and spend the rest of the night standing near the snacks. She was near the snacks. She was sharp and quick, and she made the room louder, in a way that felt good rather than exhausting. I liked her right away. We talked for most of the night, and I texted her the next morning. The first 8 months were real. I want that on record. I'm not going back through everything looking for signs I missed. She made me laugh. We had a Sunday routine. She'd come over. We'd cook something. We'd watch something. She'd call me on random Tuesday afternoons just because something had happened that she wanted to tell me. I was genuinely in it. We didn't officially live together. She had her own apartment 2 buildings down. But she was at my place 4 or 5 nights a week, and I had a toothbrush and a charger at hers. Practically the same thing. Around month 8 or 9, something started shifting. I couldn't name it at the time. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't one incident. It was more like a frequency change, something small. I kept noticing without quite deciding to notice. She'd show me texts. Not worried, not asking for advice, just casually, like you'd hold up a photo that doesn't quite make sense. A guy from her old job, Jake says hi lol. Her college ex. Brandon's apparently back in the city. And while I was reading the screen, she'd be watching my face. I told myself that people share things. It doesn't mean anything. But every time I responded the right amount, not too much, not too little, something in the room would settle. Like I'd passed a small quiz I didn't know I was enrolled in. I should have asked about the quizzes. The party was at a friend's apartment 3rd floor, the kind of place that gets too warm fast when enough people show up and nobody opens a window. Qley and I arrived together. The first hour was fine. Drinks, people we half knew, someone's music choice that nobody challenged. I went inside to get refills. She stayed on the balcony with a few people. I was carrying both drinks when I came back through the glass door. She was kissing someone. I found out later his name was Marcus. I didn't know him. He wasn't part of the regular group. I stood there with a drink in each hand, trying to make what I was looking at make sense. 3 seconds, maybe 4, and then her eyes opened. Not a startle. Slowly. She found me over his shoulder, and the kiss didn't stop. It slowed. Like a sentence finishing itself on purpose. I set both drinks down on the ledge. I picked up my jacket from the chair where I'd left it. I walked back inside. I don't have a clean word for what I was feeling. Hurt is too soft. Angry is too hot. It was more like something locking into place, not understanding yet. Just the sense that I'd seen exactly what I was supposed to see, and that I'd been positioned in front of it. The music inside was still going. People were talking. I moved through the apartment toward the front door. She caught up to me before I made it out. She put her hand on my arm. What are you doing? I'm leaving. You can't just leave. She stepped in front of me. Some people near the door were paying attention now. You're not supposed to leave. You're supposed to compete. I looked at her. I said nothing. I walked out. The walk back was 12 minutes. I didn't put earphones in. It was cold enough that I could see my breath, and I focused on that. The breath, the sidewalk, the sound of footsteps. I was somewhere before thinking. Something had happened, and I hadn't caught up to it yet. By the time I reached my building, I had started to. The eyes. The way the kiss slowed the moment she spotted me in the doorway. She hadn't pulled away, she had adjusted. She'd turned it into a signal the second she had an audience. That was the word. Audience. She hadn't kissed someone at a party. She'd performed something for me. And instead of reacting the way the scene required, I'd set down both drinks and left. She was furious. Not because I'd hurt her. Because I hadn't followed the script. Then the last 4 months started making sense in a way I hadn't wanted them to. The text she'd show me. Jake says hi. Brandon's back in the city. The way she'd hold the phone where I could see it and then watch my face while I read. There was a weekend in month 10 where she went quiet. Vague, busy for 4 days, every answer, technically an answer, nothing actually said. She was with people from work. Then Sunday night she showed up with food and was warmer than she'd been in weeks. I told myself she'd needed space and come back to me. I know now that's not what happened. There was a dinner where she brought up her college ex getting married. No reason she'd seen the announcement online. Wasn't upset, just mentioned it. Then she left it sitting in the middle of the table and waited to see what I'd do. I said something neutral. She changed the subject. But the one I keep coming back to is a Sunday evening, maybe 3 months before the party. We were watching TV, and she muted it. Just like that. She said, "I just need to know you'd fight for me." I thought she meant in general. I told her I wasn't really the jealous type, that I didn't think that was something to be proud of. She didn't respond. She looked at me for a second and turned the volume back on. I filed it as a strange moment and moved on. I know now what she did with it. She filed it as data. She filed it as, "He doesn't react. He needs something bigger." I don't think she thought of herself as running a system. I think she genuinely believed that someone who loved you would fight for you, and the only way to know was to test it. I think she'd learned somewhere that intensity and love were the same thing, that willingness to compete was the proof of caring. The system made sense to her from the inside. That still doesn't make it okay. It just means it had an internal logic, and the logic wasn't about me. But I had been inside that logic for 4 months, passing small tests I didn't know existed. When she designed something big enough to finally see, I didn't run through it. I walked away. I was starting to understand, sitting on the edge of my bed at midnight, that those were not the same thing. I was barely home when the texts started coming in. Not from Qley. From mutual friends. "Hey, checking on you. Qley's pretty upset. She said you just walked out without saying anything. Is everything okay?" And then, 20 minutes later, from someone else. "She told Jess you've been kind of cold lately. Is something going on?" I read all of them. I didn't respond to any of them. Then Qley's own messages started. The first few were the hurt version: "I can't believe you just left. You didn't even say anything. Can you just answer me?" Then the tone shifted. By the third or fourth message, she was talking about how she always felt like she was reaching for someone who wasn't there. How I never opened up. How this just confirmed something she'd been carrying for a while. And then a version emerged. "I was just talking to someone at a party. You walked out over nothing. You made it weird in front of everyone." I did not make it weird. I said 2 words and left through a door. She was running different versions through different people before I'd even taken off my shoes. The version for one friend, I'd abandoned her. The version for Jess, I'd been emotionally absent for months, and this was just the last thing. A third version filtered back to me through someone else. I caused a scene and left her standing there. The thing I didn't want to admit was that it was working, at least partially. The messages from friends had that careful pitch of concern where you can tell an opinion has already formed. They weren't asking what happened. They were checking on her. Through me. The story was already in the room before I'd had time to say a word. I read all of it. I still didn't respond. Not because I had a strategy. Because I didn't know what to say yet that wouldn't sound exactly as dramatic as she was already calling me. I didn't have language for what I'd seen on that balcony that came out looking like anything other than someone who walked out of a party for no reason. I went to sleep. The next morning, I went to her apartment to get the few things I had there. A spare charger in the kitchen, some clothes, a book. Not a conversation, not a confrontation, just my things. She wasn't home or wasn't answering. I had a key. The kitchen junk drawer is where everyone keeps spare chargers. She had 2 of mine, one on the counter, one in the drawer. I grabbed the one on the counter and was about to leave, but I opened the drawer for the second one anyway. There was a receipt sitting right on top. Folded once. Not hidden, no envelope. Not tucked under anything, just sitting there the way things end up in junk drawers because no one bothered to throw them away. I almost didn't pick it up. I picked it up. The restaurant was called Harlan's. I'd never been there with her. It's the kind of place that has a prix-fixe menu on the website and doesn't take walk-ins on weekends, the kind of restaurant that means you plan the night in advance. $180. Table for 2. The name on the card was Marcus R. The date was 2 weeks before the party. I stood in her kitchen holding that receipt. I wasn't angry. I was doing the kind of arithmetic where you already know the answer before you finish writing the numbers. He'd taken her to dinner 2 weeks before she kissed him in front of me. I had been with her the day before that dinner. She hadn't mentioned him once. I put the receipt in my pocket. I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out my phone. I wasn't looking to dig through anything. I just wanted to check one thing. I half remembered a message from a few months back that I'd never thought twice about. I found it. 4 months ago, in the middle of a conversation I hadn't thought about since. "You never get jealous enough. It makes me feel like you don't care." I put the phone face down on the table. This was what it was. Not a party mistake. not something that got out of hand. She'd had dinner with Marcus 2 weeks before the party and then staged the kiss because she'd run out of smaller tests. She'd needed something big enough to finally get a reaction, and she'd left the receipt in the junk drawer because she was so certain I'd play the role she'd written, so certain I'd compete that she hadn't thought she'd need to clean anything up. That was the part that sat heaviest. Not the dinner, not the kiss. The certainty. She was so sure about my role in her system that she hadn't bothered to hide the evidence. She'd left the production notes in the drawer. I packed the rest of what was mine. I left her keys on the kitchen table. No note. I'd already said what I needed to say walking out of that party, and she'd said more than she knew when she yelled after me. I took the receipt. Not as a weapon. Not with anyone specific in mind. I just wasn't leaving it there. It was the clearest thing in that apartment, the one object that made a straight line from the beginning of everything to the end. I stood at her front door for a moment. Then I left. I went home and sat with it for a while. Not stewing. Just sitting. Letting the shape of it be what it was. Then I sent Qley one text. 4 words. I'm not playing. No list of what I'd found. No screenshot of the receipt. No explanation of the dinner, the old message, the pattern going back 4 months. I wasn't trying to win an argument over text. 4 words. And I put the phone down. I didn't block her number. I kept the line open not because I expected anything, but because I wanted to know when it stopped. There's a difference between leaving a door open and waiting behind it. I wasn't waiting. I just wanted to know when she ran out of moves. There was one person in that friend group I trusted enough to tell the actual version. Someone I'd known longer than I'd known Qley Ryan. He'd been at the party. I called him that evening and told him, the balcony, what I'd seen, what she'd yelled, what I found in the drawer that morning. Not to ask him to do anything with it, not to get a side forming. Just because one person in that circle knowing the real sequence of events felt important. I needed the true version to exist somewhere outside my own head. Ryan listened the whole way through. When I finished, he said, "That's a lot to find out in one morning." Yeah. I didn't ask him to say anything to anyone. I wasn't building a counter-narrative. That wasn't the point. The actual boundary wasn't the 4-word text. It wasn't the key I left on her table. The real boundary was simpler than that. I was done explaining myself inside a story I had never agreed to be part of. She'd written me a role, the contestant, the one who competes, the one who proves love through jealousy, and I had been playing it, slightly and unconsciously, for 4 months. I stopped when I walked out of that party. She just hadn't registered it yet. I went to sleep that night. Real sleep, the kind I hadn't been getting for weeks without knowing why. There's something about finally having accurate information, even when the information is bad, that lets you rest in a way that uncertainty never can. The phone was quiet. Day 2. I was eating breakfast when the notification came in. I watched her name appear on the screen, watched the call ring through, and kept eating. The voicemail was 4 minutes and 12 seconds. I noticed the exact length. I don't know why. I listened to it once. It opened the way I expected, controlled, like she'd written the first part. You completely overreacted. It was nothing. You walked out of a party because of something you completely misread, and now you're not answering me. Which is a pause. A restart. I think you owe me a conversation. That's all I'm saying. I kept listening. The tone shifted around 90 seconds in. Not dramatically, just slightly less prepared. Like she'd made it past the part she'd rehearsed. I just needed to feel like you cared, she said. That's it. That's all this was. I've been feeling like I can't reach you, and I needed to know. Then quieter. I just wanted to see if you'd fight for me. A pause. That's all. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I thought you'd, I don't know, react. She kept talking after that. Something about Marcus, how it wasn't what it looked like, how she felt like she had no other way to get through to me. I let the recording run to the end. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. I saved it. I didn't call back. I didn't text. I sat at the kitchen table and thought about a Sunday evening 3 months before the party when she muted the TV and said, "I just need to know you'd fight for me." Same sentence. On that Sunday, it had sounded like a relationship conversation. Hearing it now on a voicemail, I could hear what it actually was. She genuinely believed it. That was the part I had to sit with. She genuinely thought that competing was the proof of caring. That jealousy was evidence. That if you wouldn't fight, the love must not be real. I don't know where that belief started, and I'm not going to guess. But she'd built a system around it, and I'd been running through it for months, and the night she made it large enough to finally see, I'd walked out instead. I'm not saying that to be generous to her. I'm saying it because it's true, and because understanding why something happened doesn't make it okay. What she did was design a situation to provoke me, and then tell 3 different versions of the story to 3 different people when it didn't produce the result she wanted. That's not a communication style. That's manipulation with a reason attached. The voicemail didn't make me angry. It made everything make sense, and sense is harder to sit with than anger. I saved it and went to work. 2 days later, Ryan texted me. "Hey, wanted you to know. I was near the door when she said that to you. You're supposed to compete." I heard it. "She's been telling people you caused a scene." You didn't. You didn't say anything. You just left. I read that 3 times. Not because I needed the validation, or maybe a little, yes, but mostly because it meant the version she'd been circulating had a crack in it now. One person in the group knew the real sequence because I'd told him. Another person had been standing in the right spot and was naming independently what he'd seen. The version where I caused a scene required everyone at that party to either have missed it or to collectively agree on the same thing. Not everyone was agreeing. She'd had a crowd of witnesses at that party. She just assumed they'd all remember it the way she needed them to. I wrote back, "Thanks. I appreciate it. I wasn't going to use any of this. Not the voicemail, not the receipt, not Ryan's text. I wasn't building a case. The false narrative was already losing ground, not because I was dismantling it, but because too many people had been in that apartment when she yelled the line that explained the whole thing. The game collapses when one player leaves the table. The missed calls came over 4 days. 12 total. I know that number only because I counted them after they stopped, not while they were coming in. While they were coming in, I was just living. They stopped on a Thursday. I noticed because I got through the whole afternoon without looking at my phone once, and the afternoon was fine. The texts from mutual friends slowed and then stopped too. Whatever version of events she'd been circulating, it didn't have enough to sustain itself without a response from me. You can't maintain a narrative about someone who isn't doing anything. There's nothing to update. About 3 weeks later, I ran into her outside the coffee shop near our building. I saw her first. I kept walking toward the door. She caught up. She looked like she'd prepared things to say, the kind of prepared where you've been rehearsing. She started talking. She wanted to explain. She knew how it must have looked. She'd been going through something. I let her get through all of it. I didn't interrupt. When she stopped, I said, "I heard your voicemail." That was it. Nothing else. I watched her face for a second. She knew which voicemail. She knew what was on it. I walked away. She didn't call after that. No texts. No messages through anyone else. Some things end loudly: doors, raised voices, things you say that you can't walk back. This one ended on a sidewalk with 4 words, and then just the sound of walking away. The game ends when one player walks off the board. I wasn't supposed to leave. I was supposed to compete. I left anyway.